Welcome to my channel, where manga and anime stories come to life in audiobook form. Here you'll find manga-inspired adventures, anime-style fantasy, action-packed battles, dark mysteries, and emotional story arcs. From powerful heroes and crazy plot twists to supernatural worlds and unforgettable characters, there's always a new story waiting. If you've ever said just one more episode at 2 a.m., you'll fit right in. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Upgrade walked a few steps ahead of Sal, pointing at various tables in the workshop. She had decided to provide a private tour, thinking there was a high possibility Sal would spend a lot of time here in the future. Sal tried his best to look at the back of her head as much as possible while she walked ahead or focus on the workbenches she pointed to with her hand. However, after seeing her armor, concentration became increasingly difficult. Unlike the loose-fitting and practical work clothes, her armor was cool enough for people to go wild over. Sal understood why the school had banned body-revealing uniforms for students. Sal had absolutely no idea she was the hero Upgrade. Upgrade was one of the few people who earned a hero's name as a supporter and possessed abilities befitting that reputation. What confused Sal the most right now was the fact that he was replicating her ability, Upgrade, in a perfect form and even witnessed its activation scene in person. Sal was incredibly curious about what the necklace she wore was. Is it a delivery substance? A device storing materials? No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't find the answer. Upgrade turned around and laughed loudly. Hey, do I need to give you an item to appraise for you to snap out of it? Yes. Sal snapped out of it momentarily and started retracing what he missed. Upgrade put her hands on her waist and made a sympathetic expression. You haven't talked to girls much, have you? Her tone was almost teasing, and Sal became obsessed with the thought that he had to refute. That's unfair. You're not an ordinary woman. Upgrade tilted her head slightly and made a thoughtful expression. Oh, not ordinary? Then what am I? Sal struggled to find the right word in his head, glanced at Upgrade, and eventually spat out the first word that came to mind. Just prettier. Upgrade bit her lip, placed a hand over her chest, and turned her head. She tried to hold back her laughter, but eventually burst out, and Sal received the maximum sympathetic gaze she could show. I didn't even tease you yet, if this is how you react. She took a step closer and lightly cupped Sal's chin with her hand. If I genuinely tease you, what happens to you then? Her face came right up to Sal's, and a playful smile bloomed. Sal stumbled backward with his heart pounding. Bumping into the workbench behind him with a thud, he apologized to the workbench, saying sorry while backing away. Whatever face he had left evaporated into embarrassment. Upgrade burst into clear laughter once again, covering her mouth with her hand and gracefully wiping away tears forming in her eyes with her fingertips. She looked at Sal with an expression of disbelief and said, Wow, I thought you'd be innocent, but didn't know it would be this much. Amazing. Other employees working nearby raised their heads one by one to look this way, and Sal realized more than half of them were women. Upgrade whispered towards them as if conspiring. Our new appraiser is weak to flirting, apparently. So let's not bully him with that, okay? All eyes in the room focused on Sal, and his face flushed red. You know, Upgrade is someone who takes even a little compliment as a love confession. A slender man approached with a bright smile. He wiped off liquid that looked like green monster blood from his hands and held out a hand to Sal. You're an appraiser, right? As Sal took his hand and nodded, the man took out a small stone and held it up high between two fingers. Could you take a look at this? Then I'll teach you how to make Upgrade lose interest in you. Sal turned his gaze and saw Upgrade laughing with another female employee while looking at him. All right, Sal muttered while activating his ability. I'm Sal. The stone was a core. Cores exist in various shapes and sizes, but such things didn't matter at all when appraising their value. What was important was the amount of magical essence stored inside and the refinement level. Sal only had basic knowledge about essence and couldn't be called an expert on the refinement process. But when it came to value assessment, he was more confident than anyone. There was a pattern inscribed on the stone, hidden by the man's fingers. Can I touch it? Sal reached out for the core. Without hesitation, the man handed over the core. What do you see, Sal? He asked quietly, gathering other employees closer with his remaining hand. Sal took a deep breath and slowly rotated the stone between his fingers. His eyes were reading details impossible to capture with the naked eye, cross-analyzing with countless pieces of information stored in his brain. This stone is a core. At least rare-grade quality, but essence storage capacity is poor. The surface is smooth, meaning the processor refined it without knowing the value of this item, and traces of essence leaking are visible from these protruding parts. As a result, the value of this core has dropped to 1/5 of its original value. As Sal appraised the core, his mood started to worsen. This seemed to be handed over not just as a simple test, but to humiliate him. A difference an ordinary appraiser, or even a student, couldn't notice. How would a student feel if they excitedly appraised a core handed by a hero, only to be told they were wrong by that hero? Traces of attempting a self-charging rune are also visible, but it's an absorption rune, not self-charging. Consequently, it became a useless item absorbing only the appraiser's concentration instead of essence. For example, a gullible appraiser. Sal raised his head and looked at the man, saying, "So, do you want it back? Or do you want to hear more details about how much you ruined this stone?" Silence filled the room. Sal looked around at the employees surrounding him. He wondered if he should have held back a bit more, but it was already too late. These people were heroes, university instructors, and seniors. But Upgrade had an expression of unable to hide her surprise. Seeing Upgrade's face like that, greed arose. Sal gripped the core again. Since he received everyone's attention anyway, he decided to use it properly. If there were people he would work with in the future, he had to earn their respect. Sal quietly deactivated Upgrade's ability and pulled up his mother's threads. The only difference was that he removed his mother's knots to make it the highest version of restoration. He knew it was excessive. A bit childish? It was. But he didn't care. Sal turned his head to the man who handed the core and said, "Never mind. I'll fix it for you." Sal pushed all his power into the threads and focused on the core in his hand. The core began to glow white, pulling in the mana flowing from Sal's fingertips. Every single groove was restored to its original form. But while maintaining the pattern as is, he refined the pattern with essence controlled by his eyes. Gritting his teeth and going through the final calibration with his appraisal ability, Sal deactivated the ability. The core had grown too large to pick up with fingers, and Sal held the core with both hands. Whether due to fatigue from using the restoration ability at maximum output, only heavy sincerity remained in Sal's tone without playfulness. Rune engraving and refinement exist to increase the value of an item. This core was rare even in its original state, but since the correct self-charging rune was added and calibrated to have no essence leakage, it would be closer to epic grade now. Upgrade approached Sal in an instant and snatched the core from his hands. With a tap on her pendant, one hand changed into a precision claw, and she began to inspect the core precisely with various tools. "Francis, check this right now." "Gosha, look at the essence leakage status." Sal narrowed his eyes and glared at Upgrade. "Meaning they can't trust me? After inviting me to this workshop, they intended to mock and ignore me in the end?" If his appraisal ability hadn't been this strong, he might have missed the essence leakage too. If that happened, everyone would have laughed at me, right? Sal looked at Upgrade one last time and completely engraved her skill into his mind. Since it was the second replication, the threads were composed much more smoothly. All eyes around were focused on the restored core, and Sal was now exhausted with both this workshop and the employees. Now, having copied the Upgrade skill and having a workbench in his room, he had no reason to rely on them anymore. Whether due to fatigue or inner anxiety, he no longer wanted his work evaluated. Sal briefly put his hand on a nearby workbench to balance himself, and quietly returned to the silver cohort. He had to find his group again. Damn it really is epic. Upgrade gasped, inspecting the core for the third time. "Gosha, how's the status?" Upgrade gained certainty from the thumbs up flown from the other side of the core. "Really? No leakage either? That's nonsense." "Francis, what about you?" She looked back at the rune expert, and he was staring at the core in disbelief. "Perfect." Upgrade deactivated her ability with an expression as if she would dance on the spot. It was an item she absolutely couldn't afford with her salary, but she had to get her hands on this somehow. This core was much superior to the one she wore around her neck, and her ability automatically began churning out numerous blueprints utilizing this core. But she pushed those designs aside and maintained focus. She couldn't believe the fact that she witnessed a newly admitted freshman accurately piercing through and appraising a broken core with attention deficit. That alone was amazing, but he perfectly restored the core and even precisely calibrated the rune. Upgrade looked back at the scene, where light flashed in Sal's eyes and his hands became tools of essence. It was the most marvelous among the moments she had seen. "Okay, I admit it. This one is completely your win. Still, can I pester you for a discount, occasionally?" Upgrade turned around, but Sal was nowhere to be seen. She looked around, but others also seemed bewildered, not knowing where Sal went. Taking a few careful steps, Upgrade went back along the path they came, wondering if Sal got lost. Scanning the line of workbenches, she looked around. When she returned to the main area, countless students were roaming around tables pouring out stupid questions. Finally spotting Porge, the head of the workshop, Upgrade walked to him. "Porge, didn't you see the student who was with me? The kid with the silver token." Porge snorted. "That was already 2 groups ago. The kids here now are the black cohort. It'll be over soon." He turned around and walked away as if it was no big deal. Upgrade's head became complicated, making it difficult to concentrate. She knew reviewing the work took time, but did it take that long? Porge stopped and added one more word. "Ah, and speaking of which, guess you're not like before either." That kid with silver eyes said this. Upgrade nodded slowly, thinking about what Porge intended to say. "I asked that guy if he was going to take the crafting class you teach." "Wow, never saw such a fast rejection in my life." Upgrade looked at Porge with eyes of disbelief. When I pushed a bit more asking for the reason, he said you weren't his preferred style of person. Didn't know he'd say that to a hero. Is he the type to ignore supporter classes or something? Ha! Porge burst into laughter and crossed the workshop floor, faithfully answering other students' questions. Upgrade bit her lip tightly and recalled the whole situation again through Sal's perspective. Arf. Such fucking bullshit. Then she poured all kinds of curses on herself and painfully vomited out a suppressed scream. Whoa, wait a minute. You'll scare the kids, Upgrade. What is it? Porge walked back and looked at her with a face full of worry. Quite a few students also looked at her with confused eyes. Some of them were not because of her explosive reaction, but simply fixed their gaze on the existence of Hero Upgrade itself. Conscious of the gazes, Porge took her and left the place. What did I do, Porge? I ruined everything. That kid must be detesting us right now. Porge's expression seemed to say, calm down, it probably isn't that serious. But Upgrade confessed the whole situation before hearing those words. The kid approached me. He was separated from his group. Fine, that can happen. I just explained as usual. Workshop operation method, class curriculum, stuff like that. Porge nodded. Upgrade raised her head to face Porge and stepped closer, saying, but then that kid took out and showed me a silver token. Do you know whose it was? It was Vila's. He was a kid who signed a contract with the Reavers Guild. How amazing and tough must he be? Plus, he's an appraiser. So I asked him to look at my gloves, to check if he was really good. Porge raised both hands and stealthily stepped back, but Upgrade moved with him and kept talking. But he's really fucking good. Not at student level already. He saw through everything inside the gloves. So I got excited too and showed him my hero suit. Looking at the kid's face, he totally fell for it. So I tease him a little. He's a kid who'll work with us in the future anyway. And since he totally fell for me, I just wanted to use that to take the lead. He's a student. Upgrade, calm down for a sec dash. Yeah, the joke was a bit one-sided. But seeing a kid I thought would be tough react so innocently was so cute. I was gonna stop soon too, but that problematic son of a bitch ran out holding that core. Marcus. Porge corrected quietly, but Upgrade didn't accept it. Yeah, fuck with Marcus. Marcus heard the kid was an appraiser, brought that weird core, and tried to play a prank. I tried to stop it too, but the guys stopped me saying they just wanted to see what happens. In the end, it turned out you tried to humiliate him. The disappointment in Porge's voice stabbed Upgrade's chest. No matter how much she tried to rationalize, the fact that they were the villains didn't change. Porge tapped Upgrade's shoulder lightly and smiled to reassure her. I'll talk to Marcus. If we make him apologize to that kid, maybe the kid will be interested in the class again. But I don't think Marcus is the only one who needs to apologize. Upgrade steadied her breath and looked at Porge with meaningful eyes. That core couldn't fool the kid. That kid finished appraisal in seconds and told us everything that was wrong. Listening to that, we lost our minds. Honestly speaking, it was totally cool. I really wanted to hug him. Upgrade let out a hollow laugh and continued. But he went one step further. Said he has a restoration skill too. His eyes flashed, and the broken core turned into a completely new item. What? Does that make sense? If only that was it. No leakage, rune engraving perfect, core stable, and it's even recovering essence by itself right now. We are creators. How can we maintain rationality? Can't. Right. So as soon as he finished work, everyone rushed in to check. We were looking at it until just now. Porge's brow furrowed deeper. Restoration, appraisal, and silver eyes? Seems like the successor of the Argento auction house. Upgrade closed her eyes and quietly bowed her head. When Sal said his name, she was so distracted by the damn token that she didn't notice the meaning at all. Porge clapped his hands and said, okay, stop blaming yourself. If something is broken, think about fixing it. Give Sal priority for enrollment and offer the class for free too. Add some materials, a personal workbench, and mentoring directly from the best hero. Porge pointed at Upgrade, and she nodded, taking off her flannel shirt and tying it around her waist. Porge guessed her intention, immediately seeing that. Going to find a kid now? Upgrade glanced at the door on the other side of the workshop and said, he should be registering skills by now. I'll be back soon. I'll be honest. Divinity's voice was heavy as she looked at Sal and said, I'm so glad you're as exhausted as I am. She started walking backward in front of Sal, placing a hand on her chest, and adding, the fact that both the first and second rankers of the silver cohort are destined to collapse on the mat during combat training strangely warms my heart. Sal gave a bitter smile and raised the corners of his mouth, while Divinity raised both arms and cheered. Did it? Our grumpy prince finally smiled. Her blue eyes sparkled, and she spun around dancing. Sal waved his hand, pretending to stop her, but couldn't hide his laughter. He was genuinely grateful for the fact that Divinity was by his side. After confessing everything that happened with Upgrade, Sal intended to quietly ruminate and endlessly reflect and sink into himself. But Divinity absolutely did not allow that crap. She tried hard to refresh the atmosphere and make Sal laugh again. Before long, The two arrived at the skill registration zone. Although these towers were really high, they weren't that wide, so they had to move across several floors. None of the students could figure out the logic behind this route, only feeling like they were passing through places they had already passed. Divinity suspected if this was some kind of cardio training, but the probability seemed low. After a few hours like that, they reached the registration zone located near the top floor of the tower. The view outside the window was marvelous. Sal could faintly see the distant harbor, and the grid patterns drawn with light indicated the safe zones reclaimed from monsters so far. The guild towers, soaring high into the sky, gave people a solid sense of relief from various parts of the city. The interior was also impressive. Curious mechanical devices placed here, and they made the zone look more like a precision production facility than the workshop earlier. "Wow, look at that," Divinity said, pointing to a giant tube filled with transparent liquid. Sal's eyes told him it was a type of liquefied essence. He had never seen such a thing before, and wondered why something like this was in the skill registration zone. He turned his head and pointed to another piece of equipment. "What is that?" Divinity also looked that way, and her eyes widened. "Isn't that an electric chair?" "Welcome again. You might be getting sick of my voice by now, but please focus and listen until the end, as this content is a truly important procedure in the orientation. While we learn, grow, and develop, it is very important to reflect on where we came from. Displayed in the space surrounding you now is the skill refinement technology of the previous generation. And as you get closer to the assessment zone, you will directly witness the evolution process of that technology. When the war first began and the appearance of monsters continued, our nation poured all resources into offense and combat. Anyone who could knock down monsters received support, and we did our best to carry out that task. But monsters continued to appear, more portals opened, towers rose, and even dungeons appeared. We couldn't solve all this with just a method of knocking them down hard. This time, Quest's voice was played from surrounding speakers as automated audio. Like a kind of guided tour, different voices were playing in each zone. Sal remembered learning most of the history related to the war from his parents, but even his parents' generation hadn't experienced the most terrible times. He grew up protected from many realities that others had to endure. Since his parents were beings with abilities, they were under the nation's protection. But people without abilities had neither the resources to seek protection nor the ability to afford the exorbitant costs of the safe zone. Their role in society was just to wait until heroes reclaimed enough territory to help them return home. Essence containing mana was already leaking into the atmosphere, and we knew it would eventually change us. However, that change came too late for humanity to survive as a species. When knockdown hard tactics were no longer effective, we began to switch strategies. It was research and development. Historically, the field humanity excelled at the most. Like in the past, when we utilized ancestors' knowledge and heritage to open breakthroughs for new technologies. But this time, we had to start completely from scratch in a way never attempted before. A situation with no right or wrong answers. All knowledge we gained was the result of trial and error. Even now, people with completely different perspectives exist in safe zones around the world. They deny acquiring skills itself to fight monsters. Rather, they believe skills themselves are a curse, and all this situation is divine judgment, a divine punishment. Divinity's eyes grew large. Numerous artifacts were displayed where they arrived. Crudely carved structures and objects inscribed with unclear patterns were kept inside transparent protective cases. Stone tablets written in foreign languages, totems decorated with feathers and colors, and strangely shaped tools. All were objects from the world beyond the portal. Sal only glanced at them, turning his head, fearing his mental strength would run out if he looked further. But he thought those unfamiliar and bizarre artifacts were interesting. Speaking of gods, monsters also possess faith. What all these artifacts imply is something greater existing beyond the portal. We have made great progress in analyzing and deciphering their language, but there is still a long way to go until achieving perfect translation. Who knows? Perhaps someone's skill among you is the key to reveal the secret of this war. Someone's ability might be used to grow crops or help treat wounds. Or that skill might be powerful enough to become a force, sending monsters back to their original world. Maybe reclaiming lost territory might be you. Who knows? Sal had to admire Quest's eloquence. His words had appeal and a great cause. The public had no choice but to fall for it. Most students were smiling, imagining a future using their abilities for good purposes. Most seemed to empathize with the remark about gaining power strong enough to deal with monsters. But low-ranking students of the supporter class also had expressions showing they were equally moved. This is exactly why we need to register your skills. Regarding problems that do not exist yet, someone among you might hold the answer. There are also those who already possess amazing abilities. That power is stronger than any generation that has appeared so far. You grew up in an environment where essence is incredibly dense, and truly amazing talents have opened due to that. There will be abilities you are familiar with, and potential abilities you don't know yet. Our skill registration procedure might open that hidden door. Good luck. The tour zone ended at that point, and turning his head, Sal saw students of the same silver cohort at different points of the tour. Some seemed to have just started the tour. At that moment, Divinity winked at Sal and pulled him to the front of the line. Sal didn't question her decision anymore. There was no reason to argue with a friend who had perfectly predicted everything so far with the ability to see the future. The door in front opened, and the space unfolding before them was truly spectacular. A golden staircase as wide as a highway unfolded spirally along a large open hall. As sunlight pouring through the front glass window shone on the stairs sparkled, emitting a dazzling golden light. Exclamations burst out among the students. Sal was also captivated by all this. At the bottom of the stairs, staff members in uniforms were greeting them with smiles. The gold cohort has finished skill registration and is enjoying refreshments at the Sky Lounge. Please move to the top of the tower as soon as your registration is finished and check your designated seats. An employee pointed upwards, and Sal looked up with his mouth open. The stairs wrapped around the tower like a giant spiral spring lined along the glass wall. At the top was a platform with a completely transparent floor, and in the center, several transparent tubes wide enough for a car to fit were situated. Before Sal could understand what those tubes were, a giant capsule shot up from the invisible lower floor and soared straight up the tube to the top of the tower. The employee turned again and pointed to those tubes. Don't worry about going back down the stairs. We use rapid transit tubes, similar to elevators, but operated based on essence instead of cables. Divinity pulled Sal's sleeve slightly, and only then did Sal realize he was staring too blankly at the tubes. Shaking his head to compose himself, he started climbing the stairs, following Divinity. They were located at the very front row of the crowd. After climbing about 30 steps, the stairs led to a wide flat area and continued ascending again beyond that. On the temporary floor created like that, rest areas and small rooms were lined up facing the glass wall of the tower. Divinity kept walking without stopping, but Sal wondered what the purpose of this space was. Probably study areas. Looks like a premium zone. Divinity said, pointing to a small terminal set up next to a partition. Sal guessed it was a payment terminal, thinking about how much Q credit it would cost to study here. When they arrived at the next stairs section, Sal suddenly felt overwhelmed. Of course he didn't mean it, but he felt a strong impulse to complain about everything. Both his body and mind were extremely exhausted. Internal essence was also nearly depleted, and worry began to arise that he might ruin the skill registration. Above all, he kept ruminating on his behavior at the workshop, thinking it was a useless act. Too childish. The act of activating a skill with full force in a way to embarrass someone was the peak of childishness, and his parents would have certainly been disappointed if they knew. His father might have acknowledged it if he knew the whole situation, but that wasn't the point. Done with self-pity now, Divinity laughed and said to him. Before they knew it, they had climbed to the next floor. Because we've arrived, she rolled up her right sleeve and approached the information staff. About 10 registration machines were lined up, and outwardly they all seemed to have similar appearances and crafted with craftsmanship. Curiosity triggered, Sal ignored his fatigue and activated his eyes, starting to evaluate each machine with essence-based ability. Although he couldn't perfectly understand all the information, Sal could compare the machines and classify them by grade. Divinity, Sal shouted urgently just before she touched the wrong machine. When Divinity looked back with a puzzled expression, Sal pointed to a machine at the end of the line. Use that one. I'll wait until you're done. Divinity hesitated for a moment, then eventually turned away from the machine she first chose. The information staff raised an eyebrow. You have a smart friend. Divinity looked at Sal with curious eyes, hearing those words, but Sal shook his head side to side and pointed to the same machine. I'll explain later. Use that one first. Sal gave up lining up for other machines and decided to wait, standing right behind the machine Divinity was using. The information staff showed curiosity, seeing her sleeve already rolled up, but didn't voice whatever thought he had. Sal's gaze was fixed on the machine. Architecturally, it looked slightly better than other machines outwardly, but the biggest difference was the power source. The core key to operating that machine seemed freshly replaced, and the amount of essence was much fuller than other machines. Other machines looked like half-drained batteries. Unlike the crude and rough old equipment they saw during the tour, the equipment here boasted a very modern and sophisticated appearance. Just seeing the staff smoothly adjusting the arm insert to fit Divinity's height, one could guess how high the precision and completeness of the machine were. Seeing it designed considering comfort meant the creators had considerable confidence in the equipment's performance. Divinity put her right arm into the insert. She smiled, listening to the faculty member's explanation, and nodded after a moment. Shortly, her eyes clouded white as her ability activated. Sal quickly turned his gaze back to the core. A massive wave of essence flowed through the machine there, and that power began to fuse with Divinity's essence. It seemed like two forces collided for a moment, but soon stabilized and melted into a single flow. Divinity's eyes grew large. She also seemed not to have expected this result. As the staff helped take out her arm, the flow of essence separated from inside the machine divided into a few pieces, but hovered over a small plate located near the machine's surface and soon stabilized. After the staff confirmed a few input items, that flow was fixed in a completely stopped form, and the plate popped out with a thud. The staff handed the plate to Divinity. This is simple. Divinity passed by Sal with a face of extreme fatigue, but with a ridiculously happy expression. A bright smile that didn't care about fatigue was on her lips. You definitely have an eye for machines. A faculty member guided Divinity to the lounge area, where she could rest for a while. Sal waited quietly while the machine initialized. After a few minutes passed, the staff in charge of the machine looked back over his shoulder and suggested Sal try using another machine. But Sal shook his head. It's fine. I want to use this machine. While he waited, other students stood in their respective lines and began registering on other machines. There were about 1 or 2 people standing behind Sal, and he felt anxiety creeping up without realizing it. To calm his mind, Sal organized the pattern of the upgrade ability once again. He held onto that power tightly until he became completely proficient to use it like an original skill, preparing to activate without delay at the necessary moment. The information staff stepped aside and gestured. You can come now. Sal inhaled quickly to steady his mind, nodded, extended his arm, and stepped forward. Relax. It doesn't hurt. The information staff asked with a professional smile. What is your name? Sal answered as if slightly relieved. Salvatore Argento. The staff pointed to the new plate just inserted. Now, do you see that plate? Please manifest the ability you possess to the maximum. You don't need to worry about essence consumption. There's a core acting as a battery inside the machine that will supply essence instead. So please use it with all your might. The most powerful version of your ability will be recorded. Got it. Sal looked at the staff in shock. With all my might. Sal doubted his ears. I can use the core inside the machine instead of my essence. That meant removing the only limit that had restricted his ability. There was no need to hold back anymore. Excuse me, student. Only then did Sal realize he was holding his breath. Sorry, it looked too good. Haha, everyone does that. The staff laughed and started manipulating the device's input. Use it with your best effort. I'll give you a signal. A moment later, Sal felt a sponge-like grip wrapping around his arm. It wasn't an unpleasant touch, but it was unfamiliar. Suppressing the instinct to pull his arm out, he tried hard to focus. The staff raised 3 fingers and the countdown began. Looking past those fingers, Sal saw a familiar figure looking at him from afar. Upgrade. 2 fingers remained. Sal gritted his teeth and focused his mind. Now wasn't the time to worry about upgrade. When 1 finger remained, Sal wondered for a moment if he should apologize to her. He looked at her. Surprisingly, her expression was one of cautious fear, not curiosity. Sal's gaze turned forward again, and the moment the last finger folded, it felt like time stopped. It was different from the speed ability he used in the past. This time, it felt like being in a space where no one else existed but himself. In his vision, there was only the space where his essence was stored. Sal instinctively knew he could draw all that power, but the amount was too overwhelming. Sal unconsciously wondered how much essence he could use before time ran out. The threads inside were craving essence, and for the first time in his life, Sal didn't hold back. His eyes flashed, and his father's ability activated first. Essence flowed straight from the core into his eyes, but there was no pain. The core was testing him. His eyes were sending warnings that the procedure was scheduled to end soon, but Sal couldn't accept that. There was still too much power left. Sal deployed his mother's ability. The power of restoration surprised the core, and the core paused for a moment before letting more essence flow. The threads Sal elaborately wove were gradually growing into solid ropes. Since Sal was used to controlling them, there wasn't a single knot even in the final stage. The core seemed reassured again, and at this, Sal recalled upgrade ability he had newly memorized. The threads became thicker, and Sal's eyes reacted immediately. With fear and restrictions gone, the ability was perfectly compatible with Sal's eyes and will, and Sal could instinctively know. It was an exceptional situation, but there was an even bigger problem. Threads in the form of different abilities occupied so much space that they almost completely filled Sal's whole body. The core was shaking as if contemplating whether to end it here. Sal's body seemed to have no more space, and there was no way to make that space either. Sal instinctively looked at the bundles of threads. The forms of different abilities looked very inefficient. Sal felt an indescribable craving to continue experiencing this new power. It felt like someone who had been scooping water from a puddle all his life suddenly fell into the ocean. He absolutely didn't want to let this go. Sal began rearranging the threads. The threads weren't tangled or knotted, but his eyes told him that those threads could overlap, layer, and be woven harmoniously. Excitement wrapped around Sal's entire body. His new bundle of threads integrated all abilities, yet left room to add more abilities in the future. Sal pulled the essence even stronger. Then essence flowed in like a river. But soon the flow decreased and resistance arose. However, the threads wanted more power for completion. Sal continued to squeeze the core. He could feel the core scraping the bottom now, but Sal didn't care. He was almost at the completion stage. Sal desperately hoped for just a little more, hoping the core that seemed like it would end any moment would hold out a bit longer. Then, power burst out from a completely new source. It was essence more powerful and abundant than before. As the threads completed perfectly, Sal cheered inwardly. The craving for overwhelming power also subsided, and the new thread spun and settled stably inside his body. He couldn't know what he just created, but whatever it was, it felt like an ability that fit him perfectly. The source of the new essence quietly withdrew, and this time Sal didn't force it to stay either. What he could do was finished. A shock passed through Sal's body as if electricity flowed, and he woke up from the daze. Both legs were stretched forward, and a staff member in charge was supporting his upper body with an arm under his left shoulder. Sal looked at his arm with blurry vision. Blood was trickling down. Hearing was gradually returning, but it was difficult to focus his mind completely. Students of his cohort were looking at him with gazes mixed with fear and awe. Sal tried to focus on where Upgrade was, but she wasn't visible. After blinking a few times, his vision became a bit clearer, and Sal discovered Divinity being restrained by staff at the front of the crowd. "Sal, can you hear me? Are you okay? What happened?" A voice rang out. Sal frowned in confusion. A blurry voice came from somewhere. Weren't you Salvatore?" He turned his head toward where the voice came from and saw Upgrade in her suit standing right in front of him. Her arm was transformed into a mechanical arm form, embedded into the side of the machine. Sal sighed and tried to focus, but everything was spinning. Genuine worry was embedded in her face, and Sal swallowed hard with difficulty. Suddenly, words he had to say came to mind. "I just left earlier. I was sorry." And at that moment, everything was swept into darkness. Sal blinked his eyes open. He was lying in a bed, his head resting on a pillow. His luggage was still unpacked. He wondered why he fell asleep again without even unpacking. "Oh, seems like you're opening your eyes. You'll hear the answer soon." Quest laughed and refilled a teacup. The headmaster looked opposite the bed and held up the teapot silently, and Sal heard Upgrade refusing the tea. Quest tilted his head and looked straight into Sal's eyes. "How is your condition, Mr. Argento?" Sal blinked once or twice and woke up completely. He expected his whole body to ache, but surprisingly, his body condition was extremely good. He opened his mouth to answer, but saw an unfamiliar door at the end of the room. Instinctively activating his eyes, instead of the usual appraisal result, countless suggestions on how to improve the door poured out before his eyes. Sal breathed slowly and deeply to calm his pounding heart. Something was strange. He was used to analyzing details and obtaining information with his eyes usually, but this time it was too detailed. "It would be better for you to explain this part yourself," Quest advised gently and brought the teacup to his lips. Sal turned his body in the bed and looked at Upgrade, sitting on a chair. She had her arms crossed and was looking at Sal with an expressionless face. "Right now, wherever you look, you see blueprints, right? Plans to improve something or change it more efficiently." Sal exhaled deeply and nodded. His mind was confused. How do they know I see these things? Is this part of the upgrade ability? As if answering the question himself, Sal shook his head and opened his mouth. "This isn't my ability. I never even tried to use it." Quest put down the teacup and smiled. "I think I can explain that part." He leaned toward Sal and pointed his right arm. "Your skill registration was perfection itself. Numerous elements fit exquisitely to create the best registration result. Except for one thing, that there wasn't a core powerful enough to withstand your demand." Quest put his hand in his coat pocket, rummaged for something, and took out a metal plate. "This is your final cue card. All registered abilities are organized. There were a few unexpected items, and one of them seemed to need help." He smiled warmly and genuinely, placing the metal plate on the blanket where Sal could reach. "I told Upgrade that you probably stole her ability at the workshop. Was I right?" Sal looked back and forth between the two, not knowing if he should be ashamed or not. He didn't want to deceive others, nor did he want to lie. So he nodded. Confused emotions rose on Upgrade's expressionless face. Among all those skills, why was it mine of all things? Maybe it was because he just woke up, or maybe because Quest and Upgrade already knew too much. Sal decided to just confess honestly. "In the future, I picked this among all the skills I saw at Quest Academy. I trusted that guy's choice." Upgrade's eyes narrowed. She glanced at Quest. "Is he really okay?" Quest waved his hand, ignoring her question, and stared piercingly at Sal. "You'll have to tell me about that in a bit more detail." Sal shrugged. "Emet Definity. She had the ability to see the future. I told her about the premium stands, and we found and drank a beverage called Sleeping Tiger. Ah, Purple Punch. She told me. Thanks to that, the registration result would be good. He observed the two's reactions and continued. Originally, I intended to register the physical type ability used in the first assignment. But the more I thought about it, that wasn't the direction I wanted, so I made a plan to find an ability that fits me well. When no questions came, Sal concluded. So I decided to tell her the ability I liked the most every week, and Divinity scanned the future and found the ability I was most excited about. He turned his head and pointed at Upgrade. That was Professor's ability. Upgrade shook her head. This ability has many downsides too. Material consumption is big, energy exhaustion is severe. There are plenty of better abilities. Quest looked at the card on the bed. I heard about what happened at the workshop. Your father's appraisal ability fell short of your level, and so did your mother's restoration ability. That means... Quest looked at Sal, pointed a finger at a specific spot on the card, and looked up at Sal. Skill Master. This ability must be the reason you can exceed the general limits of the skills you replicated. Then he lowered his finger and smiled brightly. This is no simple matter. In all my years working at this academy, I have never seen this ability even once. Nor has this ability ever been registered with the Guild Alliance. Quest paused for a moment and looked back at Upgrade. Then he made an expression that looked somewhat excited. It might not be, but if my hypothesis is correct, you might have created a new ability this time. Upgrade's hardened expression crumbled completely. She looked at Quest with eyes of disbelief. But he said he's seeing blueprints right now. That's my ability, Upgrade. Quest lifted the card plate and showed it to Upgrade, saying, although not directly written on the card, there are many parts that match your ability. Sal definitely possesses your ability, but that is only a part of the skills Sal possesses. While Quest and Upgrade were conversing, the scene from the registration flashed in Sal's mind. He recalled the moment he started weaving threads to create more space. Then he contemplated his body with his ability and was speechless. The beautiful pattern flowing inside him was closest to perfection among all abilities he had seen so far, and filled with infinite possibilities. Appraisal, restoration, and upgrade abilities were all woven into a single thread, and what was more surprising was that the thread was operating unconsciously. When Sal let a little essence flow into the thread, that energy flowed along the thread at a ridiculous speed. His eyes gradually adapted to the room, and all object around seemed to hold tremendous potential. Fantastic blueprints began to float naturally in the air, and he felt an impulse to make all of that a reality. Upgrade's gaze was fixed on Sal, but her question was directed at Quest. Is it a good ability? Can we confirm? The headmaster smiled and asked back. How are creator grades divided? Upgrade didn't seem very excited about Quest's inducement to guess, but forced a smile and answered, folding fingers of her left hand one by one. Common crafter, uncommon crafter, rare crafter, epic crafter, and legend crafter, right? Quest pointed at Sal and grinned. And now, a mythos crafter to be recorded in official documents for the first time in our academy is right before our eyes. Sal learned that after losing consciousness, he received treatment in the academy infirmary and was then transferred to his room. For some reason, it was emphasized that Upgrade had fixed the door broken in that process. Sal, I'm really sorry. My colleagues and I committed a discourtesy to you. I'll apologize formally again later. With my friends. After finishing the short meeting, Quest and Upgrade left, telling Sal to rest. It was already evening time, but Sal wasn't tired at all. Upgrade's expression kept lingering in his mind. Her expression was truly a mix of fear and awe. And seeing that reaction, Sal wondered if the new ability he possessed was really something amazing. A smile naturally spread across Sal's face as he got out of bed. Although the entire day's schedule was blown due to the skill registration incident, he had plenty of Q credits, and the Academy had secured one remaining spot in every module for him out of consideration. Sal saw Quest glancing at Upgrade when mentioning the conditions for that. One of the conditions was that Sal would receive direct supervision from Upgrade when taking workshop classes. She apologized for her previous team members and her own behavior, and Sal also apologized for overreacting and repairing the core. Another condition was special contracts that could be triggered intermittently. Upgrade explained that Sal's performance in the relevant projects would have a significant impact on his academic progress, and Quest hinted that success in those projects could be an excellent opportunity for entry into the Savior program. Sal got out of bed and turned on the screen to check the next day's schedule. Seeing a small notification speech bubble floating next to his profile icon, he clicked it. Name, Salvatore Argento. Code name, unregistered. Occupation, student. Starting class, supporter. Rank, student first year, 19/silver cohort second. Abilities, skill master. Rank, high. Class, replication type. Mythos crafter, rank, master. Class, creation type. Essence control, 77%. Essence refinement, 2%. Essence calibration, 21%. Academic report. Required subjects, M equals mandatory. M, skills, unevaluated. M, survival, unevaluated. M, combat, unevaluated. M, crafting, unevaluated. Electives, unselected. Reputation, Quest Academy, unregistered. Guild Alliance, enregistered. Hunter Bureau, enregistered. Affiliation, Argento Auction House, sponsorship tier, tier 3. Reavers Guild, silver, token holder. Scout status, not applicable. Official certification, not applicable. Threat level, unidentified. Assets, 594 Q credits. System remarks, unidentified. Cao raised an eyebrow looking at his essence and ability items. Although he had absolutely no idea what exactly each figure meant and by what criteria the classifications were divided, he pressed down his curiosity and turned his gaze back to the module selection screen. What was important right now was making the right choice. Quest had designated crafting as Sal's mandatory module. Although Sal wasn't certain, he guessed the crafting course meant the workshop where Upgrade and her team were. Anyway, just having one clear direction gave him a sense of relief. One elective module remained. He absolutely didn't want to do field practice. On the other hand, analysis seemed like he could easily get a high score thanks to his eye skill. Since there was about a month left until classes started, he could focus on other subjects. The last selectable module was administration, but, judging by the number of seats, it looked the least popular. There was no reason to overexert himself by taking one more subject, but a small voice whispered somewhere in his head. If there are few people, wouldn't the professor in charge give bonus points or something? After pondering, Sal scanned the options once again and nodded. Academic report. Required subjects, M equals mandatory. M, skills, unevaluated. M, survival, unevaluated. M, combat, unevaluated. M, crafting, unevaluated. Electives, analysis, unevaluated. Administration, unevaluated. Sal thought it would be really great if he could change just the survival class, but there was no way since it was a mandatory module. Just as he shrugged and was about to close the screen, the list of abilities caught his eye. Skill Master and Mythos Crafter. The names alone sounded amazing. Sal smiled without realizing it. Even if he got kicked out of the academy and had to return his parents' house, he felt he could consider it a complete success if he went back with just these abilities. Even if he didn't know how to utilize the abilities properly yet, it was certain that it would be a great help to the family's auction house. Taking a step back to organize the screen, Sal tripped over his suitcase and stumbled. It occurred to him that it was almost the second day, but he hadn't unpacked a single bag yet. Let's just finish it while I'm at it. Sal muttered softly and started opening the suitcases one by one. The task itself felt like a small adventure. He discovered for the first time that a washing machine and dryer were provided, and also found out that the storage space in the room was more ample than expected. Filling the closet shelves took longer than expected, because Sal kept changing the position of t-shirts, contemplating what was better. The moment Sal reached out to change the position of the t-shirts again, Sal's two eyes shone silver and the most optimal organizing method floated above his vision. What is this again? Sal turned his body toward the remaining luggage. It was the same this time too. Information on how to stack to use space most efficiently, how to organize to finish quickly, all came into view at a glance. Keeping the ability on, Sal moved following it exactly. Done. Without time to worry. Moving as the ability told him, organizing finished in an instant. Just as he was about to wrap up unpacking, a faint knock was heard from the door. Walking around the bed to the door, Sal stopped for a moment. Because the door, which was originally a normal hinge type, had changed into a sliding door that opened with a single button. He recalled Upgrade saying she fixed a door. Her ability was Upgrade, not restoration or repair, and it turned out exactly as the word said. Sal pressed the button, and the door slid smoothly into the wall and disappeared. Sal, who was staring in admiration at that sight, met eyes with Hannah, standing in the hallway. She was also admiring the appearance of the door. All right. The promise to meet in the evening suddenly came to mind. To Sal, it felt like something from days ago already. Hannah gave a thumbs up over her shoulder and said, "Should I just go?" Sal shook his head. "Want to come in? Or should we go out somewhere? Where's Kane?" Hannah raised one eyebrow and answered, "He probably doesn't want to see anyone after the combat assessment today." Just as Sal was about to answer, Hannah looked into the room over his shoulder. "Wait a minute. I think your room is bigger than mine." Then, without a word, she strode past Sal into the room. Sal followed her in, and she walked counting her steps toward the glass wall. And upon arriving, she frowned slightly. "It just looks big. It's the same as my room. What did you put in your workroom?" Hannah peeked her head toward the room with the workbench, and seeing only basic options placed there, she said as if disappointed, "Didn't you apply for the professional package from the administration bureau?" "Wait a minute." Sal raised both hands to stop Hannah. "I'm really out of it right now. I fainted during the registration ceremony and just woke up here." So I have absolutely no idea what I missed, whether it's an administration bureau package or whatever, and I don't know what happened to Kane either. Hannah's eyes grew round. The kid who fried the machine, was you? They said it was because the core malfunctioned, but nobody believed that. Sal shrugged. I don't really, maybe. Hannah snorted as if satisfied, flopped onto his bed, and stretched her legs. Sit comfortably. You have a mountain of information to catch up on from now on. Sal laughed and took out a chair from the workroom side to sit. Hannah looked at him with a serious expression. First, starting with the stimulating stuff, this academy is a monster's den. Combat assessment? That was just a disaster. Kane got his leg smashed by some tiny girl. She used a skill where power accumulates the more she runs. She just blew Kane away in one shot. Hannah shook her head left and right, then continued, speaking exaggeratedly. The girl tried to help Kane stand up, but maybe her legs gave out while standing up. She collapsed right away. Everyone laughed. She's probably hiding in her room now and will get expelled. Sal made a pitiful expression thinking of Kane, but Hannah continued. Like an excited child. And there was a kid throwing lightning. It was really cool. Moving as if teleporting, he won like 4 or 5 times. Alright, the combat assessment was a wheel battle. If one person challenges, the winner stays and the loser is eliminated. If you win 5 times, you automatically drop out and the next person starts. You had to keep fighting until you won 5 games in a row or lost. Thanks to that, the number of people decreased really fast. Sal hated the combat assessment, even more at Hannah's explanation. A wheel battle was a test where both endurance and safety were important, and he considered himself lacking in such aspects. But what happened after was even more amazing. They made the winners fight again. That speed skill girl dropped out first, ended right away by Lightning Man's sliding tackle. There was also a kid who made all the boys surrender with a charm skill, but was helpless against a female student controlling body size in the end. Hannah pretended to pick something up from the floor and then threw it straight down. It was really awesome. The charm skill didn't work on the same gender. Anyway, I thought the giant girl would win. But there was some Superman there. Superhuman strength, plus ridiculously good jumping power. He jumped right under that giant girl's chin and headbutted her, and she was down just like that. Anyone could see it was a KO. She must have fallen on a few spectators. That was kind of funny. So is he first place? No. As soon as a fire attribute user came out, his weakness was caught immediately. Must have been weak to fire. Sal didn't even think of stopping her. Every single skill she told him about was interesting. Hannah paused for a moment, then started counting competitors one by one with her fingers. Then suddenly her eyes sparkled. Did you see the first place by any chance? First of all, her beauty is no joke. So I kind of dislike her. Her ability is scary too. It was a mind control ability. I mentioned the charm skill, right? She just made them surrender, but this first place made them self-harm, making them hit their own face with their fist or strangle their neck to faint. It was totally dark and creepy. And there was a guy summoning ghosts too. The ghosts were super weak and destroyed immediately, but seems like high utility in other areas than combat. It was a really unique ability, so it was kind of cool. Sal looked at Hannah carefully, but saved his words, fearing she wasn't finished yet. But Hannah put both hands neatly on her knees, sighed, and shook her head. Would have been really good if you saw it yourself. Students here are really strong. Then what about you? How was your combat? Hannah's face brightened up. Are you trying to dig up my ability now? Sal burst into laughter. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. Hannah straightened her posture, set 2 fingers of her right hand like a gun, and aimed outside the bed. After aiming with one eye closed, she clicked her thumb down, and a blue sphere of light popped out from her fingertips and floated exactly at the position she aimed. For times like that, creating spheres of light floating at each of the 4 corners of the bed. Hannah put her finger gun to her lips and blew on it like blowing breath. Who dash? The blue spheres started shooting beams toward each other and soon fired downwards as well. By the time Hannah pretended to holster her finger at her waist, a barrier centered on her was completed. Sal carefully touched the transparent wall. It was solid, even pressing with his whole body weight. It didn't shake or react at all. Hannah showed her hand. Like this, I can block people out. Instantly resistance disappeared, and Sal lost his balance and planted his face straight into the bed mattress. Hannah couldn't hold it back and burst into laughter. Pahaha. Sorry. But that just now was really too funny. She pulled her knees to organize her legs, making space for Sal to get up. As you can see, I can also let people in. It's a typical defensive ability, and in combat, I lure the opponent into my zone to create a stalemate. I lasted up to 3 rounds like that, but eventually had to surrender due to essence depletion. Hannah deactivated the barrier and looked at Sal with expectant eyes. Now it's your turn. What's your ability? Lying on his back on the mattress, Sal pondered for a moment. Is there a need to hide? Although it hadn't been long since they met, Hannah showed a consistent, honest appearance. Sal stared blankly at Hannah, who told him all the information she didn't hide and didn't need to tell. More allies, the better. Sal confessed everything that happened during the day to Hannah. He talked about everything without omission, up to the awkward meeting at the workshop. When he explained finding out the skill through conversation with divinity in the future, Hannah's expression was shock itself. Still, Sal didn't stop and continued the story. He liked that Hannah was listening attentively to his story. He explained how his ability worked, and that usually essence was the biggest limiting factor. Whoa, so that's why the core shattered into pieces. Goodness, just how much power did you draw and use? Sal laughed and raised one hand. I was just about to tell that story too. He explained what happened during registration. The story about pulling up all abilities he got his hands on to the maximum because he wanted the best result. But there was no space in my body to hold all of that. So I fused them, and then they said a new skill was created. Sal clapped his hands with the last words, and Hannah flinched in surprise at that sound. Sal groaned briefly, got up, went in front of the screen, and operated the terminal. And pointing to his registered abilities, he smiled toward Hannah. Here, this is the proof. There are two skills. One is Skill Master, which is replicating or creating skills. And another is Mythos Crafter. It's a combination of upgrade, restoration, and appraisal. Don't know well yet, but the headmaster was super excited. Hannah stared piercingly at the screen, then said to Sal with a completely dumbfounded face, You can craft myth rank items now. Sal looked at Hannah blankly. Ah, so that's why the headmaster was so excited. Thud, 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 thud. At the sound of Hannah running to her room, Sal burst into laughter. He wondered if this was really happening. Just a moment ago, he made an excuse that he didn't have materials, but hearing that, Hannah had shot off the bed and run at full speed to her room. And really, in less than a few seconds, Hannah appeared smiling with the corners of her mouth hanging from her ears, holding a backpack into which she had hurriedly shoved materials. Without a word, she turned the bag over and poured it onto the bed. Gasping for breath, she pointed to the items scattered on the bed one by one. This is from the administration office. Received it. Use whatever you can use. Sal tried to hand Hannah a bottle of water, but stopped because she waved her hand, refusing. No, it's fine. That's later. Do this first, hurry. It seemed her judgment was clouded because she was too excited, but Sal eventually obediently knelt down and sat beside the bed. Just as he activated his ability to analyze the materials she brought, he heard a suppressed gasp from the side. Looking up, Hannah was covering her mouth and looking at him. Why, what is something wrong? Are these materials not usable? Hey, your eyes are seriously amazing. Sal smiled as if relieved. What? I thought something bad happened. Thanks. They were cool in a cold and heavy way when they were silver, but the purple right now is truly enchanting. Sal paused. Purple. Hannah tilted her head. You should go look in the mirror. Sal didn't say anything and ran straight into the bathroom. Hannah must be playing a prank. There's no way my eye color changed, right? Gripping the sink and looking down at his hands, he steeled himself before looking in the mirror. And when he raised his eyes, his irises were pulsating with purple light. As he let essence flow, the color became more vivid, and Sal was captivated by that vibrant hue. For the first time in his life, he could look properly into his own eyes without a headache. He continued to stare at his own face without a word. A smile slowly appeared on Sal's lips at the unbelievable situation. It was the first time he looked into his eyes this closely. This time, he wanted to see how his eyes changed when he activated his ability to the maximum. Without any preparation or experiment, Sal pushed essence into the threads, as if squeezing it out. Then everything in the room changed. Mysterious light emitted from his eyes, and countless blueprints poured into his head. His brain unconsciously filtered out most of them, but optimal designs were retained. Transformation paths for almost every object in the room came into view. When his uniform was seen through the mirror, the reaction was much more intense. Sal couldn't explain why, but he instinctively knew how to improve it. It was a struggle to suppress the impulse to upgrade his uniform. Can I make cool armor like Upgrade 2? Walking out of the bathroom thinking that Upgrade's suit came to mind, and Sal had no choice but to stop, staring blankly into empty space. Hannah, who was sitting down classifying materials, raised her head. Wow, you're shining dazzlingly right now? Are you using max output? When there was no answer, worry began to load in her voice. Hannah got up from her seat and waved her hand in front of Sal's eyes. Are you okay? Sal. As Hannah's hand brushed in front of his face, Sal was startled and stumbled backward. Only then did Sal look at Hannah properly and gather his wits. With great effort, he closed his eyes and deactivated the ability. It felt as if an amount of adrenaline he had never experienced before was flowing through his whole body. Sal picked up the water bottle he was going to hand to Hannah earlier, took a long drink, and looked back at Hannah. Is your mind back a little? Hannah asked carefully. You look like you lost your mind for a moment earlier. Are you okay? Sal didn't know how to express what he saw, but decided to try explaining. I thought about an armor suit, and it really floated in my head. Hannah just burst into laughter. That's naturally how it should be. With crafter abilities, stored blueprints naturally pop up in your head. Sal laughed, waving his hand and shaking his head. No, I mean, that blueprint just popped out from a memory I just saw in passing. And without even using a skill, I learned how to disassemble the memory of an item and remake it. Excited, Sal poured out words like a rapid-fire gun. But the version I saw was incomplete. I could see all the flaws. And something really cool happened. Suddenly, Sal pointed a finger at Hannah, and she blinked in surprise. When you wave your hand in front of my eyes, the armor suddenly changed. It transformed, and a barrier was added as a function. Your barrier function. Hannah narrowed her eyes and asked, "Are you saying you're going to absorb my ability and make me into armor right now?" Hannah crossed her arms, tilted her head slightly, and smiled playfully. Honestly speaking, it's on the decent side among the flirtations I've received so far. She deliberately swept back her hair once and smiled slyly. Sal was still ruminating on the blueprint he just saw. Although it was just a simple thought, his body itched with the desire for armor production, even knowing he wasn't going into battle right away. Then the gloves upgrade war came to mind. Outwardly, they were ordinary, but they changed into a completely different appearance when using an ability. Snapping out of it at a rustling sound, Sal looked at Hannah holding materials on the bed. The materials aren't that good, but should be worth a cup of premium coffee. You could do whatever you want. Let's see what I can make with this. Sal activated his ability again and looked at the materials on the bed. Instinct wanted to upgrade each material, but Sal suppressed that temptation. He wanted to make something useful, but his eyes were filtering out all the materials in front of him. It seemed it would take time to get used to this ability. Although he couldn't explain, it felt like some resistance clearly within the skill was instinctively rejecting use on low-grade materials. To test that theory, Sal picked up a small, discolored metal ingot. Hannah looked at his hand with expectant eyes, but Sal immediately put it down and picked up another material. Hannah's shoulders visibly slumped. Sal repeated the same action for all materials on the bed, and finally gathered his arms, as if hugging himself, and watched quietly. After a few minutes passed, and Hannah made an expression on the verge of exploding, Sal let out a deep sigh of relief. "Okay, let's do it," Sal shouted with a broad smile, but Hannah seemed unable to grasp the situation at all. Sal groaned as he got up. His legs from sitting were completely numb. He waddled to open the closet and took out a set of gloves. He intended to try making crafting equipment like upgrade. Sal sat back down. It might take a little while. Hope watching isn't too boring. His eyes shone stronger, and his fingers pressed the hard metal, starting to compress it into a new form. Hannah changed her posture on the bed and watched the process closely. As Sal started adjusting the now softened metal, her eyes grew slightly wider. When Sal's hands started rubbing metal onto the glove fabric, Hannah made an expression, wondering if she should stop Sal. She guessed what Sal was making, but seemed to notice the metal wasn't enough to cover all fingers. But Sal just smiled at her. A moment later, he lifted his gaze and said, "Hannah, could you place just one of your blue spheres here?" Sal asked, pointing to the space next to the glove. Her expression changed from expectation to hesitation. She looked at Sal silently, as if weighing the pros and cons of granting Sal's request. "Is it okay? Am I overreacting out of excitement? He'll use my ability as he pleases with that equipment. How long has it been since I saw him?" Just as negative thoughts arose, the image of Sal handing her coffee came to mind. In an academy prepared for competition, the pure goodwill extended without asking rank or ability. Hannah eventually nodded carefully, making her two fingers like a gun as before, and aiming. She sent one blue essence sphere flying to the spot Sal pointed. "Thanks." Sal smiled and didn't stop his hands trimming the metal. Hannah looked extremely curious, but didn't ask. She leaned forward and watched Sal pick up the blue sphere and connect it to the glove, following an invisible line with his fingertips. Then something amazing happened. The blue sphere disappeared without a trace, and Hannah gasped and jumped up from her seat. "Now, this is the really fun part," Sal said jokingly and looked into the crudely finished gauntlet. Even without using an appraisal skill, it was obvious the gauntlet was a mess. Without tools or experience, he had created something new with just an image in his head. His skill opposed the attempt from start to finish, but Sal insisted on new creation and refused the step-by-step procedures the skill suggested. The result was in his hands now, and naturally, it was far from beautiful. A pair of old leather gloves. Hannah smiled helplessly and tried to comfort Sal. "Sal, for first time, this is pretty a mess." Starting now, the gloves were in a form with metal plates added only to a few finger parts, but high-grade essence and Hannah's ability symbol were injected. Sal hoped that alone would enable the next step. He now followed the system's guidance exactly, and the result was exactly as he wished. As soon as his gaze fixed on the roughly finished gloves, he saw an upgrade proposal pop up before his eyes, and Sal naturally fluttered with excitement. Upgrade. Sal poured his energy into the design, and let the skill handle the rest. The processing was faster than expected, but required much more energy than expected. By feel, It seemed about 1/4 of his total energy was consumed to raise the gauntlet from common to uncommon grade. Of course, that might be because he kept using the ability in the prototype-making stage. Since 3/4 of energy still remained, he decided to challenge one more step. The goal was rare grade. The gloves were still shining strongly, so Hannah couldn't even look properly. Black residue dripped from the object onto the bed, looking like it would never wash off. Sal gritted his teeth and endured. Sweat poured down from his forehead. Hannah watched Sal, who was now immersed in his own ability rather than the gloves. Meanwhile, Sal was calculating the essence and resources required to refine and upgrade the gloves to rare grade. Insufficient. Impurities in the materials were already purified, but processing metal and reinforcing leather was a task more arduous than imagined. To raise to rare grade, something more must be added. Working as is would be impossible with current materials and essence alone. In the current state, the gauntlet would stay at high-grade uncommon, and Sal didn't want to waste all his power on just that level of crafting. Although he wasn't picky about quality, growing up in an auction house, he had learned bone-deep the difference between common and rare and how large the value gap was. Sal struggled to recall a method, rummaging through his head. Then one answer emerged from the memory of the previous day. Self-charging rune. Absorption type and charging type runes, he realized while appraising the bogus core handed by the guy named Marcus. Focusing, he bit his lip and began engraving a self-charging rune on the metal surface. Utilizing his ability was much faster and more efficient than using tools, but he had to save essence as much as possible. Sal wanted to stop what he was doing due to pouring drowsiness and exhaustion, close his eyes, and just sleep. But the anticipation in his head made Sal hold on. At this very moment, he was creating something that didn't exist in this world, and finally completion was approaching before his eyes. It was a pride felt for the first time in his life. Made by me, mine, not borrowing someone's ability, but the fact that he created something with only his own power. With that thought alone, essence surged and flowed into the gauntlet held in his hand. Simultaneously, the upgrade was completed. Sal closed his eyes and collapsed onto the bed. It was a bed damp with material residue, but it didn't matter. His first creation was completed, and he watched with satisfaction as it cooled down. What on earth is this, Sal? Hannah shook Sal's arm and pointed at the gloves. Are you kidding me? Without good materials or tools. How did you make something like this? Those gloves had silver metal casing wrapping the thumb, index, and middle fingers over black leather. Finger joint parts were processed with expert-level precision, and engravings were carved into the metal. Faint blue energy was flowing along the engravings, making the gloves look as if they were breathing. Sal turned his body sideways, propped his head on his elbow, and laughed. Why don't you try them on? Huh? What are you? Sal looked at her with playful eyes. Hannah looked back and forth between Sal and the gloves. Then her face turned pale. Don't tell me you this. Her voice was trembling, a face engulfed in shock. Sal kept smiling. I made the metal casing modeling your hand movements, he said, lifting his hand in a pistol shape. Hannah's eyes grew wide. But to make it truly yours, your ability was needed. That's why I asked you to share some power. Sal reluctantly got up. His whole body ached, and he felt like collapsing soon. He thought resting properly tonight was out of the question. But seeing Hannah standing blankly, he picked up the gloves and threw them straight at her. Hannah caught the gloves as if surprised, and at that moment Sal's eyes followed the gloves and shone. His appraisal skill activated. Name, Barrier Gauntlet. Origin, crafted. Age, new. Grade, rare low. Size, 6 inches circumference. Material, artificial cowhide. Iron, unidentified essence. Attributes, prism. Can create custom prisms by aiming essence through the gloves. Barrier, creates a shield in front of the wearer. Counter, adds counterattack effect to barrier and prism, and grants damage reflection effect with a certain probability. Abilities, prism, barrier, counter. Power source, external essence. Evolution status, none. Quality, excellent. Condition, 100%. Estimated value, $9,500, $15,000. Don't throw it. Hannah, receiving the gloves with trembling hands, gasped seeing the gloves shrink to fit her hand size. She made a complex expression, as if wanting to say something but unable to express it. Just as she was about to open her mouth, she suddenly opened her eyes wide as if realizing something and looked down at the gloves. Custom-made, dedicated equipment. An opportunity to break through ability limits or transform into a completely new ability. Sal could guess it was the first time she wore equipment custom-made for her. Could her essence melt well into the equipment? There was only one way to verify. Sal raised his hand and mimicked the hand gesture Hannah showed before. Tears flowed down Hannah's cheeks. Facing the gauntlet filled with her essence, soaked in surprise and emotion, she seemed to understand what Sal wanted. Bursting into happy laughter, Hannah aimed her finger toward the wall. Straightening her finger and pulling back her thumb, she quietly uttered one word. Bang! The entire room was covered with cold blue energy, and a shield was created. Sal marveled at how drastically her ability evolved, and felt proud of what he had accomplished. Getting up from the bed, he examined the shield and said, "Not bad for a first Wadash." Before Sal could finish speaking, Hannah's lips blocked his mouth. Her two hands wearing gauntlets grabbed his shirt, pulling Sal down to her eye level. As her heels touched the floor, Hannah shared a deep and intense kiss. Catching her breath a moment later, Hannah quietly let go of Sal and looked toward the door. The automatic door connected to the hallway was open, and she hesitated for a moment before walking silently in that direction. Hannah closed the door and turned around. A playful smile hung on her lips, and at the changed atmosphere, Sal's heart beat like crazy. "Sal, seems like there are quite a lot of functions in the gauntlet." She flicked her finger lightly, deactivating the shield covering the entire room, and this time unfolded a new defensive barrier only around Sal. Sal instinctively touched the wall and spaced out for a moment at the solid feel. At a rustling sound, his gaze reached Hannah. Hannah overlapped her hand with Sal's on the barrier. It was a suffocatingly natural and relaxed movement. Silently, she snapped the fingers of her other hand. Then the shield surrounding Sal disappeared. "Let's test it with me all night."